Hello and welcome to the Noroff podcast for the fourth episode for interactive media games. My name is Marcus and this is my co-host Trausti. And
Hello.
today's or this week's guest is why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you? Where are you from? And what do you do?
First of all, I would like to thank you for this invite because that's really great, in fact, to see that some students are involved in this kind of podcast. I really appreciate it. So I'm Dr. Erik Geslin. So I would say doctor because, as you were saying just before, Marcus, maybe that's the first thing you noticed about me. So I'm Dr. Erik Geslin. I was born in France in the 70s, and I'm currently an associate professor in Noroff IM department. I'm also here in Norway, the founder and co-director of the CNAP, which is the Center for Non-Anthropocentric Play Laboratory Research. We're gonna talk maybe later about it. But yeah, currently that's all.
All right, all right.
So we have already had few classes with you in some of our courses. What courses do you teach at Noroff, and what are you specialized in?
So eventually, I'm teaching several courses from DFI, which is a design for interaction, about the way to interact between players and game through cognition, which mean graphic user interface, and so on. I give also lectures about GUI history, classification, methods, the science behind a emotion process, which is a cognitive process. Um, I'm talking about interactivity in emerging media as a as well as XR technology, for instance, which is covering under the umbrella of XR technology. You have augmented reality and virtual reality. And in some way, I'm talking about inspiration and how to use the different artistical trend, for instance, to create awesome interactive media. So, but I'm also leading a course about post-production for I am an animation student. Um, that's a full course on Unreal Engine for
Oh,
learning the real-time rendering process, the pipeline for producing animated movie in Unreal Engine during so that's the kind of things we are doing inside this course. So we are talking also about lighting, retracing lighting for inside real-time engine. And I'm also a part of some other course, a part of a ludic study with Felipe Pais, in which I give lectures about emotional character design, flow and pace principle in gamification process, I guess. And yes, I'm also introducing platform and trends in video game. And I'm also eventually a part of other courses as a conceptualization with Diego Salvador, and with like, yeah. So I'm talking in this course. I'm talking mostly about the game process pipeline, I guess.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much to do in Noroff. Talking a bit with Joshua about kind of all the work that you guys have to do. Um, But before that, I kind of want to briefly ask you a bit about your PhD because, we mentioned doctor and that's kind of interesting. But there's so many things to talk about with you that we kind of just want to touch on it a bit briefly. So, what is your PhD about?
Yeah, I guess obviously that's could be interesting because that's more related to the course I'm delivering now in Noroff. So at this point, I would say so. My PhD was about the title of my PhD was emotion induction process in virtual reality and video game. So in fact, I was working for video game industry since more than 15 years when I started my PhD, and I was really very interested by the process of inducing a complex emotion, really very complex emotion like empathy and compassion, compared to basic emotion like fears or yeah, fear, stress, and things like this. So I was always a bit skeptical by the lack of expertise in the field of video game industry, even for a very big AAA industry. In fact, mostly all the emotional, ludo, and narrative processes were empirical heuristic and based on the supposed emotional skills of some authors inside the studios, which is not relevant for an industry, in fact. So I wanted to analyze and to propose some new tools for the industry in terms of emotional induction and affective gaming also. As some tools for DDA, so what we are calling dynamic difficulty adjustment regarding the skill and the willingness of the players, but also tools for designing, like a chromatic table for color scripting and so on. This kind of tools, for instance.
Would you say that you're kind of pioneering, or you did at the time kind of pioneered a lot of this technology and industry practice?
I guess so. In fact, when I started my PhD, that was in 2009, I think. And when I started to watch what have been done before in the previous literature, yes, there was a few regarding the link between emotion and video game. So yes, I was working as a pioneer, maybe, for this field, but in many ways, people are working on emotion now in video games. So in fact, you cannot say that you are a pioneer because when you are embracing something like when you are embracing a new career or something like this, that means that there is a trend. So maybe emotion was already a trend, and people were talking more and more about emotion in video game. So I was just embracing this trend. So, but inside it, yes, maybe I was trying to move the things.
And before I go into some questions about your career in the AAA industry, you mentioned your PhD about being about like emotions in games and trying to create more emotions, right? Like understanding empathy and all that. What would you say is the problem with like video games now? Like, have you seen a lot of up curve in these type of games lately, or is it like still a problem of like lack of empathy in some video games, especially in the AAA industry?
I guess the things are really changing nowadays since more than one decade. In fact, the things are really changing. You can see it with the game, with kind of game like the Don't Know the Game, for instance. They are Life is Strange or things like this. They are really much more playing with empathy and compassion, like The Last of Us also in some ways. So, but also Senua Sacrifice and things like this. That this kind of game are really questioning much more the cognition and the relationship between people, which is good. Also, some others I was thinking about, like Senua Sacrifice, for instance, is questioning more psychological issues and things like this. So what we are seeing now is that these emotional principles are more and more questioned than before in video game industry, which is good. But there is still a huge bunch of video game who are dealing only with fears and stress and anger and things like this. So yes, things are evolving in the right way now. That's my view. But I would say nowadays I'm more interested by questioning the sense. So there's a huge sense between engaging people in a narrative way, more especially regarding sustainability, for instance.
Like movies do that a lot with like play around with empathy. You can see it in movies like The Pianist, Interstellar, and all these classic movies. Would you say it's easier to create such empathy and emotion in movies in that kind of medium than video games? Because like video games like Call of Duty and all that, they are more in the, I wouldn't say that it's like basic motion, but it's more recognizable and more clear. Like you just feeling this competitiveness of like playing Call of Duty, right? You're not really feeling empathy when you're playing that sort of first-person shooter. Would you say that the differences in the movie and video games is that like it's easier in movies to make empathy and then in video games?
I would say you was mentioning some really very good movies as a pianist and so on. But if you are watching all the movie industry, there are really a few movies with this kind of quality.
Yeah.
That's
It's really
exactly so it's going to be exactly the same in the game industry. You cannot expect that all the game industry going to produce this kind of quality, emotional quality, and that's really hard to move on and to create. But as you can see behind this movie, the interesting point is that you have some specific authors, and these authors they really get to the point to create some emotional state. And I think maybe I'm more talking about the future of video game in some ways, but I think that in some ways, which could be really very interesting for you students in the next decades, is to expect to become this kind of author in video game. You see what I mean? So it's not the same to to expect to be a part of a studio or to expect to become the author of a movie or the author of a video game. And I think that the creativity now gonna be in the hands of this kind of person. So more about creation, more emotional stuff, more creating huge story and so on. So, which is different of the technical process.
Yeah. Do you think people will be more inspired to make emotion games in the future?
I guess so, yeah. In fact, in some way, that most of the people who are engaged in emotional video game now, they are coming from the movie industry in some way.
I mean,
But there is a new generation now who is coming directly from the university, and we want to use this new medium as a really very interactive medium for the purpose of emotional states.
Yeah. Of course, people will will try to when they graduate, of course, they will look for jobs, and you, like you say, are more into emotional games, right? I was wondering, have you ever worked on that project, or you have like, if I did some research behind you and I looked at your LinkedIn account, and you have a long list of companies you worked for and the work you've done, and you also founded the Emotional Games Award. Can you tell us a bit about that journey and your weirdest job, or do you have any jobs that relate to your PhD, especially?
Oh, okay. So that's that's hard to resume a life,
Yeah.
a career in a few words, but I would say starting with the beginning. So I start to work in video game industry in the 80s.
Yeah. A lot have changed.
Well, yeah, a lot of change. Yeah. So eventually, I've worked in video game industry by chance because I was not expecting at all to work in video game industry. I was not interested in at the beginning. So
Mhm.
I was initially an artist working on
Yeah.
some illustration for video game packaging and so on. And one day I was working for a French company whose name was Lancor Studio, uh, which would be more associated to an indie studio nowadays,
Yeah.
because we were less than 20 employees, in fact, at the beginning. So
Mhm.
we were in Paris, and the CEO, he asked me if I had some skill with computer graphic, and I said yes. But in fact, that was no. At all. So I previously had no experience in CG art. So he asked me to present my CG stuff 3 days later, and I said yes. So for a 3 day night, I was trying to produce some relevant pixel art animation sprites in a 32 by 32 pixel and a 64 by 64 pixel and some screen. And 3 days later, he saw my stuff and he said, "Okay, you're gonna work for a video game with one famous French author during this period. She was called Elsa Olivier." So that was my first games, beginning of a career. So then I have worked in a pixel art game for some other French company as Microid and Titus, and eventually worked a first time for a short period at Ubisoft when the company was really small at the end of the 90s. So
Mhm.
then I've started to work in 3D also because there was no way for a pixel art anyway. So I was initially really not eager to switch between 2D to 3D, but at the end of the day, I was also passionate about 3D. And I've worked on a Battlefield engine for the Mills, it's a German company, and for a game was called a Speeder, so a game in the vein of F-Zero for Rengraph, Tokyo Japanese company. I was a vehicle designer for them. So I was
Mhm.
trying to design the vehicle as an animal. So, but that was fun in some way. So in 2005, I created
Mhm.
my indie game company,
Mhm.
which the name was Leon Brothers. And we worked on a car race video game, looked like a Mario Kart game. The game was called Smashing Toys. And that was really a beautiful period in my life. Even though we closed the company after the worldwide economical crash in 2008, in fact, because of the lack of funds.
Yeah.
Many in 2008, a lot of huge funding companies, they stopped their funds. So that was yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So after my PhD, because that was a question also. So after my PhD, I worked again for Ubisoft, but that was in Canada.
Yeah.
And I was a scientific research coordinator for several games. And I've worked also for the another Canadian company, which name is Frima, on their first VR game. The name of this game is Fated Silent Out, which was one of my best game experience in many ways. Yeah, because I was more involved. So I would say Frima is a middle game company between indie and AAA. So there are something like 300 people. So that's really much more smaller than Ubisoft, because in Ubisoft, that's being inside Ubisoft is like being in some way being a part of a tailor system. So you know that, for instance, Ubisoft in Canada, I think that's an old hospital. They are inside the old hospital, but someday I was going to work like if I was going to the hospital and I was a doctor or something like this. So it was the same kind of feeling in my head. So, but working for Freema was more human, because there was 300, maybe 300 or 400 employees inside it. And the experience was really interesting, because at this point I was really able to change the way the game was designed. Right. So that was very, very interesting. And so if I should talk about my weirdest job,
Yeah.
that was, but that's not so weird, in fact, but that was probably to become the founder and the CEO of a company specialized in law enforcement training in virtual reality. Because I had no expectation in this kind of field, not at all. But I've created this company after the terrorist attack in Paris in the 13th November of 2015 in the Bataclan, because I felt personally affected by this event for some reason. So for 6 years, I was working with law enforcement, SWAT and policemen and things like this, with guns and so on. And I was not really very comfortable at all with that. So I was comfortable. I was really very interested to create something interesting, like a very efficient training VR system with the use of the principle of game, which is really good. But I have no specific interest with law enforcement. So I've done it, and after a while, I sold my shares of the company, because I was not fitting really with my personal ethic. And more and more law enforcement company from some political unstable countries, they were requesting the help of this company, and I was not comfortable. So that was weird for me in some ways, because that's like if during a while you're working for a Call of Duty, and one day you're really meeting the military and and policemen. I don't know, and that's not exactly the same playing in real life. So that was weird in some way.
Yeah, so you worked for the French police and like the special forces of France. Then other countries wanted to get your service as well. You're saying, and that
Yeah,
was a bit weird.
yeah, but some other company have been set up with my help, like a German one, which is a Ramrod. And this company is currently, they are also dealing with military and law enforcement with the use of Unreal Engine. So they are using the same tools are as in the game industry.
Yeah.
They're also using AI for
Yeah.
the purpose of recognizing the kind of guns and rifles they are using, and the way the gun is firing and things like this. So that's really very interesting. And you can be really passionate by this kind of thing, obviously. But so I was not feeling with my personal. Yeah, I'm more interested by sustainability than this kind of thing. So I've done it
Yeah.
really by chance because of the terrorist attack in France. But at the end of the day, that was not really very corresponding to myself.
But maybe too much like maybe not into your standards, or like more not in your personal identity, like
Yeah, definitely. You're
comfortable
right.
with it.
Yeah.
So being like working with the law enforcement and all that, and work like you mentioned, working 2 times for Ubisoft, what would you say is one of the most notable things you have worked on? Because you have a list of things like the Emotional Games Awards and this, like you mentioned, the Special Forces thing. Like, what is your most notable work so far on your journey, would you say?
Yeah, so it's really harsh to answer this kind of question. Yeah, obviously,
So much.
because that's really depending of your threshold, your
Yeah.
skill, your skill.
What are
So
you the most proud of?
I don't know. Really, I can talk about. I'm not really proud of things I've done, but I'm more. If I'm looking backward, I can say that I've been really happy during some periods of my
Yeah.
working life. So I can talk with you about this happiest period, but
Mm-hmm.
not really about proudness. Because if we are talking about that, maybe I should go to the most famous license, like Assassin's Creed, for instance. That was really very exciting to work for
Mm-hmm.
this license for this series, the
Mm-hmm.
Assassin's Creed series. So I've worked on the Black Flag title, and also I've prepared the stuff for the Unity one. But that's not the things that will remind the more in my career for personally.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, building my own company with some passionate people, that was really great. Working on some title in indie, that was really great. In fact, because we shared the same feelings, the same enthusiasm. We were sharing the same passion together. We are thinking that everything is possible, even though that's not the case, but we don't care about that. Each day is really a good day. You are solving some situation all the time, and at the end of the day, you don't know if that's going to be a success or not, but you are, yes, you can be proud of the stuff you have done because you're
Yeah.
able to make it the way you're expecting it in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you would more say like you wouldn't like mark your career as like proudest moments, or like most, you more like the journey is like you have fun periods, and it's you're like really satisfied what you have done so far, and there's nothing particularly that stand out from each other. They all have their own elements of enjoyment and proud
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah. I think that yeah, proudness is really should be disconnected from the social things. In fact, you see that there is a social proudness and
Mm-hmm.
your personal proudness. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe I can say that I was proud about. Yeah, I would say yes. Maybe I'm a little bit proud having been able to regroup a team of people and paying people for the stuff they have done during a while.
Yeah.
Because during some periods, I was able to make people to winning money and working every day with no pressure, with just the benefit of to be creative, and that was good. Yeah, so maybe that was the best. Yeah.
How about your you are one of the founders of Emotional Games Awards. Like, do you think that inspires people to make more emotional games? Is it like a competition? Like, what is the Emotional Games Award? Because that is one of your one of the things I saw like on your LinkedIn account, like that stood out for me personally when I was looking at you and doing research. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, obviously. In fact, I founded the Emotional Games Award in, I think, in 2014, I guess. So I was back from the Canada, and I thought that would be really interesting to create this kind of awards, because this kind of awards they weren't existing before. So I just wanted the people to question the to question about emotion and empathy and so on. So we've made, I guess, three different events. So during 6 or 7 years, I can't remember. And yes, the people were really very interested by the topic. Obviously, they were also interested in commenting this topic, because when we started with that, many people were talking about it. So even in Gamma Sutra, for instance, I think that Gamma Sutra is not existing that longer. I think they changed the name, but that was a really very popular American website for the game industry, and they were talking about this event. So this event have been during a while. This event was popular in some ways, and we received a lot of indie and AAA games to review, and so we were able to create a jury with some really interesting people in the board of a AAA studio and so on. So that was good, and I think that during a while, yes, we were able to make the thing a little bit move on the way to create more emotional things, and that was that's worth it. But after a while, my feeling was the industry was already enough engaged in the process of emotion for many reasons, because not only due to the event we have done, but obviously this event maybe participates to this in some ways. That's hard to say really in how much that was relevant, but as I was, because some TV show have been done also about the Emotional Games Award and so on. So maybe yes, some people, some new creator, some new authors, they saw it and said, okay, some people are really working on in this field. That's existing. That's an existing field. I could really make my own proposal, and so people were more and more interested by this. And nowadays, I don't think that the game industry were needed. So that's the reason why I've stopped the Emotional Games Awards after 7 or 8 years. I personally, I think that nowadays that would be more interesting to question a more non-anthropocentric proposal for the people, how we could or we should be interested by this kind of video game, to be more able to think about our position inside this environment and things like this. So yes, I think that I'm more interested by creating something else, but that was really very important in my personally, yes, obviously. But I think that nowadays that's running itself in some way.
Yeah.
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 I mean, you talked about how you created the game awards, emotional game awards for kind of encouraging people, I guess, or to see all the emotional games. And in some way, you encouraged a lot of people to improve or uh, create emotional games, research it a bit. As you mentioned, now it's evolved so far, and as you mentioned earlier, it might have started because of a trend in the first place.
Yeah.
I think in that sense, you also mentioned like indie games earlier, and you worked with indie games and stuff. And I'm very curious about indie games because we're students, we're new, and we want to get out into the industry eventually. And indie games are kind of about starting the business, but you've started a few different things, either by accident or by interest, which is why I want to kind of ask you a bit about the AAA industry in correlation with indie. So, with the AAA industry, you mentioned obviously Assassin's Creed, which is the most standout thing. You talked about with what people might have recognized out of the games you mentioned. And I just wonder if you could give us some insight into what it's like working in the AAA industry compared to just other places. You mentioned it was kind of disconnected or spread out in a way.
What do you mean, Marcus? Disconnected?
Um, you mentioned earlier that working with Ubisoft, or especially Assassin's Creed, was kind of different from working with your own smaller company, where you designed pixel art, right?
Oh, I guess maybe I get it. So, in fact, when I started working in video game industry, in fact, there were no real triple industry. Mostly, even Ubisoft. The first time I worked for them, there was a small company in Brittany, in the west of France. So they were not in Paris. And the company have been built by two brothers, les frères Guillemot, in a really very, very small town in Brittany. It's the Celtic part of France. And we were no more than 35 people, I guess. So you see, at the beginning, the AAA industry wasn't an option at all. All the people, they were working for video games, and a few of them were really bought by people because the number of players was also low in some ways. So anyway, I think that at the beginning, my feeling that when I've started to work in video game, there was like a niche, no more than this. Everybody knows all the people inside this small. We are not talking about industry. We were talking about passion and things like this. So I felt the same kind of thing in the VR field years later, decades later, like the people they were connected together and trying to work by passion and things like this. You see what I mean? So and I've so yeah, so maybe we need to contextualize the thing because obviously talking about the game industry so the game field in the 90s or in the 90s is not the same as talking about the game industry in 2010 or 2020, for instance. So yeah, that's really harsh to say, but I think that obviously the AAA company uh, are are driven by the aims of profit, which is normal. There are no industry which are able to survive and to create innovation without some positive financial results.
Yeah.
So Anyway, that doesn't mean that I personally subscribe to the way the industry is dealing nowadays with gamification process in many ways. But I can understand that they are driven by these aims. So that's really depending of your personal goals and aims. In fact, in my point of view, I'm really very I really enjoy working in indie companies and this or medium-sized companies because of the creativity potential. Because I'm not really very interested also by my social network feedback. So I'm not you cannot figure out the number of former people who have worked for Ubisoft.
Mm.
You cannot figure it out. That's crazy, man. You can, that doesn't make sense. So, and that's the same for Pixar. It's the same for Disney. It's the same for EA games. That's the same for. So you cannot be really proud because you just have been a gear in this huge engine during a while. But being the engine of a small system, you can be proud of it because that's really hard to build. But most of the time, the interesting point is that you're going to the job every day with passion. So you are thinking about things all the time. You're sharing with your friends, and that's enough, in fact, in some
Yeah.
way.
Seems like a small knit community is kind of, well, naturally more engaging, right?
Yeah, but I'm not blaming the people who want to work for the game industry now because I have so many friends who are working for a AAA companies. But that's not the same story. Obviously, there are when I'm talking about passion, when I'm talking about a innovation and things like this, they are talking about crunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but they are really proud to be a part of a Rockstar studio and not Rockstar. Sorry. I guess
Ubisoft?
no, Rockstar Games.
Rockstar, yeah,
You
Rockstar
see.
Games, yeah.
So for GTA or things like this, or they are. Yeah, some of my friends. I saw one of my friends is now working for Funcom as a senior tech artist in Oslo. So I just get the news last week, but that seems to be a good balance. Funcom seems to be a good balance because also some AAA studio seems to be really interesting compared to others. So my personal experience is just a personal experience.
Yeah.
So you see, for instance, you can switch between because there is a huge turnover inside our industry. So I guess you can experience very good AAA company with taking care about your life and things like this, and taking care about your voice. And some other are more functioning like industry, terrorist industry in some ways. So I think that there are so many demands that you can switch from one to another one easily. Or if that's up to each people to make his own journey, but you mustn't be stuck in a place,
Yeah.
for sure.
I mean, one question I kind of started thinking about when we started talking here was obviously you mentioned that it's kind of different today. People, talking about profit and earning money in the AAA industry. And I'm kind of wondering if you think, this is just opinion piece really, but if you think that the games that are publicly, I guess you could say, by the people loved, like Elden Ring and God of War, if you think the work environment there is better, than in games that are not necessarily loved or have a lot of complaints, like Call of Duty, which is very popular, but people are like, oh, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Or games that come out unfinished, like Cyberpunk.
Oh. That's a question. I guess that's really very personal because the matter is that there are so many kind of players, so many kind of game. So how that's really very subjective to give an answer to this kind of thing because that's my personal feeling. You see, and I know many people. For instance, many people in my family they are playing games. Like my father was already 78. My mother, she is 75, and she is also playing. So my father is playing Warzone, and he is really enjoying it. So, and if I'm talking about something else, he will not take a shit of it. He don't care. He doesn't care because he is only playing Warzone. So, and he's happy with that. And most than this, I would say that's keeping that's keeping him in a kind of a high level cognition compared to when he wasn't playing. So, so in some way, I would say yes, there is a place for this kind of game and strategy. You see what I mean? But there is also some place for other game because I'm another kind of player personally, and but I'm not one kind of player. I several. I can be a casual gamer in the morning and a war sim in the evening and something else after that. So yes, that's really hard to answer.
I mean, in that sense, you could always like think that games they train your brain kind of like a workout would do, especially when they get very stressful. That's kind of good for your brain if it's not too stressful. And one thing, kind of in regards to this last question, is what is your thoughts on like battle passes and loot boxes and microtransaction strategies today?
Like I said before, I would say AAA industry is driven by the aim of profit, but I feel it normal in some way because there is no other way to be an employer for so many people. You cannot. So that's a balance. We cannot blame them to earn money because we would like to be a part of the system. So, and at the end of the month, that's our pay slip. So they need to deal with that. So that's normal. So, in fact, I would say that the player should stay always free to pay only for what he find valuable. So that's the point. So if you're using some gamification process, so neurocognitive addictive process, that's really bad. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But if you are proposing several assets, DLC stuff, and the people they are buying them because of their benefit, because they find it fun. So that means that you're building things by creativity, and you're fitting with the desire and the expectation of some others, which is good in some way.
Yeah.
So that's yeah. So obviously, loot box is it's a real question. I'm not so interested by this kind of thing. But if we're talking about season pass, for instance, that could be relevant in some way. That can be relevant because you get the free will as a player to leave if that's not corresponding to your expectation. But in the other end, you're also investing.
Yeah.
in the development, and you're also up to date with the stuff you bought before. So that's a balance, you see.
We see big game companies use FOMO, or fear of missing out phenomenon, more and more. Like companies like Epic Games, Fortnite. Could you tell us the reason and the effect of this psychological business formula, and your general thoughts on it? Because it's quite interesting way of approaching to get like income, like you mentioned.
Obviously, it's a pity in many ways. In fact, there's a pity, in fact, to this kind of process, because that's coming from the fact that these huge company are more and more using employing people coming from the psychological environment and things like this. So when you are enslaving people, anyway, that's really a bad thing. So but that doesn't mean that I'm blaming the people who are working in this company, because they need to they need to work, so they need to go for everyday life. But I think that obviously that's dangerous in many ways. So it's really dangerous, and that's up to the customer to avoid to enter inside this system. If everyone is rejecting, if 90% of the population is rejecting this kind of process, they're gonna disappear. So that's really depending of the smartness of the people, of the player, which is not always very high. So, and but that's a matter. So, and there is no ethical process behind the game industry currently.
Should companies with that phenomenon of like fear of missing out, should they have more awareness, like, or educate their customers, like come with something, up with something that like makes it so it's like less enslaving type of thing? Because like Fortnite, for example, is free, right? We don't need to buy the battle pass.
Yeah.
But children see their friends go to school and they talk, and they see like, I bought the battle pass. Then you will personally feel like, I need to do it as well because my friend has this XYZ type of skin. Do you think maybe the game companies or like the government or something should put some regulations on these things of like education to the parents or to like players in general? Is that maybe option?
I don't think that a governmental approach is an option. In fact, because as you know, the game are international, so you can get them anyway. So in the past, when some government have made some restriction about some kind of video game industry, they failed. So that means that's more up to each country to develop some alternative cultures to this kind of game. So which could be really relevant, could be to talk with the children in the school about video game. We know by experience that the parents were talking with their children, were playing with their children, for instance, are providing more support, and they are providing more rules to their children than the parents who are not playing, but who are just I would say, I'm trying to find my word, but we're avoiding we are what is the name for that, Diego? Interdire.
Avoiding kind of interacting with the games or participating.
We are not finding the word. We're not finding the word in French, so, in English. So sorry, but forbidding to forbid. Yeah, so sorry. So we are forbidding the children to play some kind of game. So talking is always better.
Yeah.
So yes, that's that's all a story of game education, which means that should be more easy for the next decade's parents because they are already playing games. So if they can play with the children, they can exchange, they can talk more about the danger and things like this. And that's the way I'm trying to teach my children, for instance.
Yeah.
So I'm playing with them, but we have some rules, and we are also sharing some criticism and comments about what we are doing and the kind of game we are playing. And we are also trying to point when some games are trying to enslave you, like Fortnite, for instance, can do that. But that's really hard, in fact, because that's really a very interesting question, firstly, in fact, because in some way, as you said, that's also a social network, a question of social network, and how you can or you want your children to be a part of the society. You can, so that's not really also sustainable to let your child out of this bunch of things. So you want to be a part of it. That's the thing. So the only way is to talk with them, and maybe the government's responsibility is more to talk about it than to forbid things.
Of course, it's a huge question. I think it's even larger than just in video games in general. Like we being enslaved by like society pressure of doing things, right? Playing
Yeah, you're
Fortnite,
right. Yeah.
So it's it's a really like hard question to pinpoint, of course, with Fortnite, especially like trends often like grab our attention, like for example TikTok or like games, movies, pair of shoes, fashion. We like get really enslaved by social pressure. So I think it's a much bigger psychological and a physiological level
Yeah.
of discussion, which is maybe for another podcast show.
Another podcast. But anyways, that's really the most interesting question, I guess.
Yeah. You mentioned ethical addiction game design during our Ludic Studies course. You were with us, right? Could you like delve a little bit into that? Like, what is an ethical addiction game design?
So, the matter with behind ethic is that ethic is always a bit of subjectivity in some way. So that's really depending of your groups. That's depending of your society and things like this. But there is a common thought behind ethic, so which is related to the free will first. So, and many games, because they are trying to earn money, they are trying to enslave you. And behind this, they are using some basic neurocognitive process, which are really very, very easy to use, in fact, in some way. And yes, for sure, I think, I've never uh, worked for this kind of company, and that's really up to you, in fact, to avoid to work for this kind of company. So you can avoid to do that. That's a personal way of life. So and you should be aware, and you are aware, obviously, that this kind of company are existing. A lot of them are enslaving people. And when I'm sharing this knowledge with you in the course, that's mostly to give you the opportunity to detect
Yeah.
the kind of game we're eliciting this kind of thing, or we're using this kind of process, and to avoid them,
Don't give them
or
more
not
talents.
to or not to get the temptation also to use this kind of process for your games,
Yeah.
because you could be also you could have the temptation to use it, because that's so easy, so easy.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
you just need some kind of system and like rewards, and like then you can like hook the player in a unethical way, right? It's
Yeah,
but it's a really fine line, of course, being like some games just being generally really fun, and that can be addicting, right? Like playing Assassin's Creed Unity, that's a beautiful city of France, just exploring that, like it's like really was really fun experience for me, right? I was like totally addicted, not in a bad way, but like
yeah,
fantastic game, of course. So it's a really fine line, but there are tricks that some game studios and companies use to um, grab the player in an unethical way, right?
yeah, definitely. In fact, in many ways, you you have the right to create some not really, maybe addictive is too much, but I would say some connection with the game.
Yeah,
And for instance, that's like when you're watching a series on Netflix, and
yeah,
sometime you're gonna watch a series, and you're gonna watch this series during weeks and weeks,
yeah,
and you're a bit addict with the theory, but that's more because you feel connected with the characters
yeah,
emotionally. And
yeah,
when the series is over, you felt like you're losing some friends. But
yeah,
there is no behind this. There is no willingness of enslaving you. That's only creating narration and creating beautiful story and beautiful characters and so on. If you are doing that for the game, that's really great. But if you are just using some a badges process, making you stressed because you're not earning points and things like this. So that's another story in some ways. But I would not say that you cannot use that for some, depending of the purpose. For instance, using some gamification process for the benefit of training, or for the benefit of uh, teaching some concepts, some really very interesting concept and so on, that's in some way that can be relevant. So that's always the same story. That's not binary. That's not black and white. In some way, you
yeah.
need to find the balance between the things. So you can use a bit of it, but you need to take care about. Yeah,
Hmm.
obviously, that's a question of ethic in some way also.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. I'm a huge football fan, and I play FIFA a lot. And I have this connection with like football, and I love the like career mode, create my own club and all that. Um, and I sort of get addicted by that. But it's quite interesting that I think there's actually a new thing in that video game that reminds you of like standing up and exercise. So it like it hooks you right to playing the game, but it also like you can put a like a timer of like reminding you like stand up and go out playing football instead. So they are hooking you in one way with love of passion of football, but they are also there to push you outside to explore real like football adventures, I guess. So
Yeah, definitely, you're right.
yeah,
Definitely, I would say I don't know if I'm wrong, totally wrong. I could, but I guess I would like to propose to the governmental institution to add some game course or game period inside for the small children in
Yeah.
the school, because
Yeah.
you need to be educated to play games like you need to be educated to play sports, but you need to be educated to stop it.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And the
Yeah.
matter is nowadays that's out of control
Yeah.
because there is no education for gaming. So you
Mhm.
can spend time and time in gaming, but you need to learn to play and to stop and to be disconnect and to go futur and so on. So I mean, you need to find your own balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with like TikTok and like social media, you can just scroll and scroll and scroll.
That's another story. Rusty.
You need I think it's a huge question, another podcast in itself, of course. I think I agree with you. We need something to educate us to like play and quit, of course.
Yeah.
So like let me just stretch and think. So Marcus.
While we were talking about like the ethics and stuff, and I was thinking of a video that came out like 6 years ago. It kind of popped off. It's basically a presentation by I think a Swedish guy who's presenting exactly all the steps you can take to psychologically get money out of your customer. It's called Let's Go Whaling, and I remember it was it just I was so confused by how open it was. It was like, here you go. Here are the ways to manipulate people to get as much money as possible. And one of the things that I remember him saying was that you don't want your game to be worth just like $160. You want the customer to be able to spend like $10,000 or more. And I was like, wow, why would you design a game like that? It seems so corrupt, you know?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
you just need to keep in mind that there are several thresholds also and several scale in the game industry. You can your willingness to become a game developer can be related to the opportunity to create beautiful story, to create a narrative, to create good memories for people. You see, and some others they just want to earn money, so they don't want to make games. They want to make money. So
Yeah.
that's another point of view. So together we are talking about people who want to make games, who want to give fun to people. So you just need to keep it in your mind. If you want to
Yeah.
make money, well, okay, maybe that's not a good school for that. You need to go for a business school. You see
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
But doesn't
And
excellence bring a lot of money? Like, for example, with Last of Us and GTA 5, those are two like excellent games. They have brought in a lot of money, but I don't think their goal was to make like their sole goal. It was to make a fantastic game.
the matter is after after you reach a certain point in the threshold, and you are you have some shares and stakeholders and things like this, you're obliged to earn money.
Yeah.
So maybe you're gonna make new employment with some people, a bunch of people who are coming from a business school,
Mhm.
and their goal is only to make money. Their goal is not
Yeah.
to create. So you're what I personally experienced in a video game industry is that after after you reach a kind of high level in AAA, you're always fighting between narration, gameplay, and financial. So and the financial is only the goal of financial is not to make the best game, is
Yeah.
to get the most of money, more.
Yeah.
So and maybe in the indie games industry, we are more talking about passion, we are more talking about creativity, we are less talking about money
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
some ways.
Like after like my 2 years of like in Noroff at Noroff, my identity as how I want to my games. I want to make something excellent, something impactful, and I want to leave my mark in the industry. I think like money will come with that passion, I guess. But let's take it a step back, and I think it's important for students to know what knowledge their teachers have, which is why I want to ask you about the most mainstream topics that students must have heard about that you also worked on, like metaverse, VR, XR. Do you think that game development is becoming more and more of a uh, specialized field with time?
Um, yeah, I get the question, I guess. So that's hard to answer one more time. So because I have no crystal ball.
Yeah,
So anyway, I see that time after time making game is easier, really.
Mm.
Then that's really easier to make a game nowadays than that was the case 30 years ago. So and the game proposal is now crazy compared to 30 years ago. I guess more than 10,000 new games are proposed on Steam each year. So that's really a huge bunch of games. So, which mean that's something like which mean 26 new game each day for
yeah,
sure. And
Mm.
90% of them are indie games.
yeah,
And just keep in mind that I think that 80% of this game they are not earning more than 5,000 k or five k dollars, so $5,000.
yeah.
So that's the first point. That's the
Mm,
context. In fact, the global market. So that you need to keep it in mind. That's really very important because what's gonna make the difference between these games? What's gonna make the difference at the end of the day between one game and one other? So in my mind, that's really very linked to creativity and originality and concept and so on, and passion obviously also. But you're making game for making money is hard and hard, even though making game is easier than before, which
mm,
means that your threshold need to be higher than before.
yeah.
So if you're making game like your nephew because he just is able to use the tools as you, that's not good. If you see what I mean. So if my father, for instance, because he is 78 and he is playing Call of Duty, one day if he is able to make his own game inside Call of Duty because of the AI and so on, what is in which way I am valuable? So in which way I can make my experience really very interesting?
Yeah,
That's the question. And I think I'm still able to make my experience really valuable because of my background in arts, in my background in terms of reference, in cognitivity, in a thing like this. I know how to create interaction. I know I can create. I can make the people paying attention to to the thing I'm doing. I know how to create a good mood inside an environment. by the use of the light and things like this. You see what I mean? So if building a game is just creating a bunch of 3D asset I'm collecting on the market, so what is the point of interest in it?
Yeah.
So I think that obviously the things are moving on, and AI gonna make a huge difference in the next decade. But AI should make the thing more easy for everyone. That's the point.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that game developer, game maker couldn't make the difference. I think that they could and they should, in fact, but that's gonna be in terms of narration,
Yeah.
history, emotion, cognition, art. You see what I mean? All the things I'm trying to teach.
Yeah.
But you see, that doesn't mean that the other one are not interesting, obviously, because that, for instance, tech artist, the tech art globally gonna be really very relevant because of the blend of technical and artistical. So if you're a good technician with skills, basic skills in coding, and you're also a good artist, yes, maybe you're gonna be powerful,
Yeah.
much more than a simple user. But if you are just an AI user and you're saying, "Oh, guys, I would like an environment with a bigger church, and that's gonna be during the Second World War, and I would like the German really very powerful and strong, and yeah." So and pop, everything gonna pop up suddenly. So okay, so what gonna be the benefit of your personal inspiration inside this environment? So it's gonna just be an environment, but that's exactly the same for the movie nowadays. When
Yeah.
I think that's interesting for a student in game development
Mhm.
to take in account what have been done in the movie industry. Movie give you also the opportunity to use all the tools you want.
Yeah.
Movies give you the opportunity to create all the environments you want. You see what I mean? But
Yeah.
what makes the difference between the movies when you are going in the movie theater and you are going outside it after a good movie? What is the difference? That's emotion. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the consistency in the art, in the style, in the, you see what I mean? That's consistency. That's an emotional state. So the characters, but I would not say not the character because you have seen a monster or something like this, but the character behind. You see,
Mhm.
maybe you have seen Elephant Man, for instance. So have you seen Elephant Man?
No.
No?
No.
That's a David Lynch movie, I guess. Is that the name in English? Elephant Man? The Elephant Man? Yeah, The Elephant Man. So Elephant Man, the movie, that's a David Lynch movie. So maybe you should have a look to this movie. It have been done in the 80s, but that's a black and white movie, Elephant Man. And that's the story of a man with a monster. But you will not remind the movie because of the monster. You will remind the movie because of the emotion behind the monster.
Mhm.
You can see a bunch of movies with monster during a week. You will forget 99% of all this movie. But if you are watching Elephant Man inside this bunch, you will remain this because of the emotion. So I
Yeah.
guess maybe that's gonna be the same for the video game industry. you're gonna have a huge proposal of different games, but you will remind some of them because of the connection, because of the emotion, because of many things. And that's going to be really very interesting to create emotion with some interactive characters in the future.
So you would say the field would become more specialized over like in the next decade, but it would be more focused on like the technical artist, maybe the environmental artist, the creative people that are putting the puzzle together. And maybe AI would take part in the like the more not unnecessary parts of like creating game, but more like
tedious.
handwork. How do you compare the VR boom to the new AI boom?
Yeah, I guess in some ways, I guess we are not talking about the same time frame. In fact, VR will obviously become a huge technology in the next decades, but the development time frame is really very slow, with a lot of challenges. And AI can be used now really very easily, which doesn't mean that the development haven't been long, because there was also a long-term development. But in our day life today, we're gonna use AI every day, every time, all the time. So that is gonna be a huge game changer. VR gonna be also a game changer, but the challenge behind the VR are really huge, and obviously AI gonna be a part of VR development. So the two technology cannot be compared. They are not evolving at the same pace. We must.
Are they a part of the same revolution, like not the industrial revolution thing, but more like a technology step into the future, I guess? Would you say they are together in that?
Yeah, obviously they will, for sure. But I mean, the temptation to compare or to oppose the two development is obviously easy, because we were talking about the VR bubble, and now we are talking about the AI bubble, but that's not the same at all. In fact, obviously, that's not because the AI bubble is growing up that's making the VR bubble blow up in some ways. I would say that that's still existing, that's still a development, but that's the pace is really slow compared to AI. And for sure, I think that you need to pay attention to AI really a lot, because AI gonna change the way to build things in the video game industry during the next decade a lot, so much. So if you're a coder, my advice would be play with AI now. If you're already coding, there are many tools for learning, to deep learning and things like this. So you can play with this, and the more you're able to understand the way that's functioning, the more they're gonna help you in your life, for sure. So if I was a really full coder, I will go through AI for sure. And for instance, so and if you're a developer, obviously that means that they're gonna change so many things. Yeah, I mean, if you're an environment artist, obviously all the environment artists in one decade, they're gonna work with AI for sure. There is that's not a question. The question is what gonna be the add value of each environment artist, because some environment artists gonna be better than some others. Why is this gonna be better than others? And I think that they're gonna be better because they're gonna have more knowledge about lighting, about mood, about emotion, about things like this. You see, than
Yeah.
other. So that everyone gonna be able to use these tools because that's gonna be really very easy to use. But that doesn't mean that all the people are gonna be able to create a consistency
Yeah.
inside this environment.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, what, how is, you talked about that, but how would you say AI is impacting your personal field, like, in metaverse and VR? Um, yeah.
Oh,
So
yeah, I see what I mean. I guess so.
it's a similar thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That's scary, and
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. Amazing at the same time.
So yeah, AI will give us the opportunity to talk freely with VR avatar, like in the like in game also. You're gonna be able to talk with NPC really freely. We have seen this week again. So,
Mhm.
but AI will give us also the ability to recognize better our environment in augmented reality, to substitute some real assets with some virtual one, for instance. I guess the creation of a universe inside the metaverse is going to be more and more easy time after time.
Yeah.
And even the child will be able to create their own universe in metaverse in a few years. As my as my 8 years old kids son is able to create his own in Minecraft now in some way. So maybe
Mm.
creating a universe in some other game gonna be as easy as that is for Minecraft nowadays. So yeah, the question is really how you can push really the limits of creativity and how you can make your knowledge really valuable for the industry. And I
Mhm.
think that's gonna be due to your background and your yeah background in many ways, in art, in technique also, because maybe you have seen on the internet there are a lot of things, or a bunch of things of stuff have been done by people with AI nowadays
Mhm.
in arts, and some of them are really well done. And you see that even though they are using AI, you can recognize in each of these artists or tech artists some skills, because you say, okay, I'm not able to do that, even though AI is existing, and I'm able to use all these tools. I'm not able
Mhm.
to do that, which means that even though the system is existing and is facilitating the use of many art system,
Mhm.
you are able to make a threshold between and a scale between the different artists, which means that art is still relevant. Art
Yeah.
knowledge is still relevant, and technical is still relevant too.
Mhm.
You see what I mean?
But
Yeah,
just a new understanding, a new like kind of workflow is needed for that reality, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We need
That's
to adapt.
exactly. In fact, the people were scared by AI because they think that, for instance, their job in the game development gonna disappear. They
Hmm.
are wrong, in fact. They are totally wrong, because already we are able to see the difference of skills between people who are using AI.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Uh, I personally have used AI for my school projects to cut on time to be more efficient.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a fantastic texture artist, but I use the texture artist AI tool to generate something for me to use, which helped me create a prototype to showcase my work. So that is one way to use AI in that particular way.
Which is
What?
good, in fact, Torosty. In fact, because what is the benefit of spending time or borrowing things
Yeah.
is that's not creativity. I think creativity is something else. So, and I'm personally talking always about creativity because creativity makes the difference. So if you can avoid to waste time on basic stuff, you should. AI
Yeah.
is just a tool for creativity.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really enjoyed using that tool to be efficient, but it helped me to be a creative in another department of creating games, right? So
Yeah.
and I agree with you. I think it's really important to be not to start thinking about AI and adapt to that workflow and understanding it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of jumping a bit back here, or I guess forward. You kind of already talked about, your point of view with the most important things in a video game. You kind of alluded to, well, emotions are the most important thing, especially the things that I teach. But in general, like, what would you say is the principles that game designers should think about when making a game? The main things, probably.
Yeah, so that's one more time. That's really hard to answer this question because there are so many kind of games
Yeah.
and so many kind of players that, in fact, the first thing is that need to be balanced by the kind of game and the kind of player you're aiming. So, but anyway, even though that's a different depending of the kind of game you're aiming to do, that's always creativity, innovation, and creativity, because
Yeah.
that's the singular point of thing inside the video game. You cannot do the things would have in the way they have been done before, because there is no point of interest for the player. If the game what have been done before is already proposing the same experience or in a better way, why should I play this game? I should play the old one. So creativity, innovation is really the main important things. But inside, obviously, inside this this huge umbrella, I would say that the fun experience is the most important things,
Right.
because you're supposed to make things who are supposed to be fun. So if there is no fun, what is the purpose of building or making a game? You see what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah.
So that should stay always fun, emotional, yes, because sometimes that's help remaining the things. In fact, emotion, you're more connected with the things when the things are emotional. So
Yeah.
if you are feeling love and things like this, I don't know if you already felt in love in a video game. No?
Yeah. Yeah. I have.
Yeah. Oh, I have experienced it also 20 years ago. So I was in June, the first one. So the first game June would have been done, and I can remember this game because of that.
Hmm.
Obviously, because that was so emotional for me.
Yeah.
So and obviously this game is counting. That's for me. So I'm not fighting for my niche, so it's not only emotion, obviously, but and that's maybe different if you're working for a AAA industry or for a indie studio, obviously also.
Hmm.
But that's not the same kind of thing. Yeah.
Another question that is kind of forward thinking is if you can predict what kind of new job opportunities would be available in like the upcoming years.
Um.
You mentioned AI, right? So some
Yeah.
AI jobs,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But in general.
Yeah. For sure, AI gonna be a game changer. So that's a point. I'm sure of it. But if we are talking about the next 5 years, for instance, I think that the job is more specialized than before. So and I would say that the interest for a tech artist is more important than before. I think that 10 years ago or 5 years ago, the people were really interested by specific modeler with some skills on in low polygon modeling and also with tools with like ZBrush and so on. But nowadays, the needs for this kind of artists is lower than before. More especially in fact, if you are working for realistic environment, because if we are talking about realistic environment, everything can be done with photogrammetry, and yeah, obviously you have to clean up everything also and to rework on the texture and so on. But that's facilitating a lot of the stuff. So yes, it's still depending of the kind of studio you are aiming. But if that's an indie or a medium level studio, like 300 people and things like this, they are always very interested by skilled people nowadays with some coding base, even though that's for VFX effects or material procedural things and things like this. So coding can be a game changer. So if you have some base, you don't need to be high skilled or C++ skilled, but you need to deal a bit with codes. And that's what I'm seeing now. So people are more interested by this. And obviously, because that's really much more easy nowadays to create some realistic stuff, that means that if you are able to create some stylized environment and stylized things, that's more interesting.
Mhm.
That's obviously.
It's
So
almost
if you are
like
able,
it's almost like style is becoming harder than a real.
yeah, I guess so, yeah, in some ways. So yeah, I see that in some, if you're creating a studio in a indie game studio, you're gonna try to make your studio to be more innovating or innovative than others. And obviously, if that's only if your goal is only to use the assets on the market, that doesn't make sense because everyone can do that. But if you are creating your own specific stylized environment, that's another story.
Yeah.
And how about the jobs that are in other industries like you mentioned, AI will not only affect the gaming industry, and how about the educational system, the police force, government roles, and or like an aircraft jobs? Will we be able to work for some of these industry with our knowledge of like creating 3D environments, Unreal Engine, and using potentially AI to create something educational or something like that? Would you say that will become more apparent and more normalized job
Definitely,
opportunity?
definitely interesting. Definitely. In fact, I'm still connected with some farmers from Noroff, a former student, and some of them they are already working for VR therapy, which means that they are using VR for the purpose of um, healing some people for addiction and things like this, and cognitive failures, and I don't know. So, and yes, in fact, you need to keep in your mind that the game industry, the game process, all the game tools are more and more used they are leaking to many fields, like training, simulation, and so on. So in
Yeah.
VR, the VR is more and more used, and sorry.
The metaverse, of course, will be a huge,
Yeah,
ginormous.
metaverse is gonna be a thing, for sure. I'm sure of it, but uh, that's gonna be done step by step. So that's I'm pretty sure that's gonna be slower than the rise of AI, for instance. Even though AI gonna help a lot of the metaverse, but metaverse is more cultural than technical in some way. So we have already many things. We have already many technical elements of the metaverse, but I think that we are not ready to enter in it culturally. I think that people are not yet ready because I see, for instance, that during the lockdown with the virus lockdown, most of the people they were working at home and remotely, which have changed a lot of the global mining about a job and the way to work and so on. But the actual trends is the actual conservative trends is coming back. So people want the employees to be back in the big building and so on, which is bad. That's awful. That's not sustainable at all. That's stupid. That's crappy for the life benefit and so on. So, but you see that I think that the people are not ready for the metaverse, and the metaverse is also could be really interesting for working, not only for playing and so on. So that's gonna be something real, but that's gonna come step by step. So we don't need to have too many expectation about it because that's gonna be a real thing. That's gonna come, but that's gonna be step by step, I think. But anyway, yeah, that's doesn't mean that we shouldn't be interested by emerging technology. Being being interested by emerging technology nowadays give you an advantage on the job market, for sure. So if you are interested by VR, augmented reality, and so on, that's not a huge step to go on. So you can go on. That's easy. In fact, you should be interested in. You can, and that give you some advantages for the work and job market.
I mean, when it comes to like metaverse and stuff like that, you can obviously see in comics and movies that people are obsessed with it. People want to experience it in some way. A lot of those metaverse sort of fantasies are very popular. So people are definitely interested. It's just about like, are people ready, to go into work in the metaverse and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's and in the other hand, since that's a bit too speculative for me. Because that's a lot of people are making a lot of financial speculation
Yeah.
with the metaverse, which is bad. And so That's a kind of iceberg. I would say that the only part of the iceberg we are seeing now is like at the eve on internet. The only part on the surface is a speculative part, which is not the interesting one. And all the parts under the water is huge, and we cannot now currently all the benefits we will get with. And obviously, I mean, for Trusty, that means that he can stay in Iceland if you want, and live there and working for a huge company or for purpose. That's not a matter. You see, really very easily, and that's the kind of expectation we can have with this kind of thing. So that's interesting in many ways. But the speculative approach, which is very linked with cryptocurrency and NFTs and so on, is really bad. But we had exactly the same in the 80s with internet.
Yeah.
That was exactly the same. At the beginning of internet, the people, they were not really very eager to jump in. I remember my father was saying, "What is this kind of freaking thing? People are dealing only with money, and they just want to enslave me for money and things like this." So, and he was not wrong, in fact, because at the eve of internet, so many startup pop-ups, and these startups, they mostly 80% of the startup, there was only bullshit. And that's going to be the same for metaverse. During a while, we're going to face this kind of bullshit companies speculative companies, and they're going to disappear after a while when this field going to be more mature.
Yeah.
But that's going to be in 5 or 10 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just we are coming into our show, so I like to ask like more simple questions. There's one particular question I really like to ask my guests. What are their favorite games? So, what is your favorite gaming experience? What is your all-time favorite emotional game, or just a game in general? Is there any particular one that you like? Maybe Mario Bros. Or Donkey Kong?
Most emotional game.
You're saying that because I'm old, in fact. But you're right. In fact, that's not objective at all. Because yeah, that's all about nostalgia. In fact, in some ways. So, but that's gonna be the same for you. So I was in love with pixel art games as Gods and Populous, for instance. So Gods was the game. This game have been done by the Bitmap brothers. So was really great. I can remember the sprite, the pixel, the small pixel. I can remember the sound. I can remember the fun I had just by discovering the game and so on. But I was a teenager, so I should never ever play this game again. Because if I'm playing this game again, maybe I'm gonna be disappointed. So I should keep it in my mind. But I would say that mostly all the game I can remind, they have been done by Ron Gilbert. So Ron Gilbert is I don't know if you know this guy. That's Ron Gilbert. He was a game designer, and he's still a game designer. In fact, he have done the game like Day of the Tentacle, Monkey Island, LeChuck Revenge, The Secret of Monkey Island, Maniac Mansion, And more recently, done two new games were available on Steam. The first one is The Cave, which is really great. So it's really like a kind of puzzle game with in a pixel art style. And the last one was Timbleweed Park. And these kind of games are really amazing in many ways because that's all about comedy in some way. So that's fun. That's really crazy. So all the game I've played with Ron Gilbert, they really blow up my mind. So that's really crazy, in fact. So that's not really very technological game. And also, I was in love, but I'm still in love with the passion and the innovative work of Chris Roberts. So Chris Roberts was the guy behind Wings Commanders, the series in the past, and nowadays he is the guy behind Star Citizen. And I'm still walking.
Oh.
I'm still walking. I'm not walking, but I'm still playing Star Citizen now, which is in some way the eve of Metaverse. Also, because Chris Robert introduced the some basic rules of the Metaverse. So yes, that's really interesting. But I'm playing some other game like I'm playing I don't like the war. I don't like I'm not really fan of violence and things like this. But I'm still really very interested by history.
Yeah.
So I'm playing some milsim game, like military simulator games like Hell Let Loose, and I'm playing also Right of Wars, which is a game for the secession war in America. A beautiful game. So Rights of War, if you can try it again one day, that's really crazy. In fact, you're playing during the secession war, which is not the more funny war because you're supposed to be in line. You need to hold the line. You're shooting. Reloading takes something like 30 seconds. So it's not a game for the bunny hopper inside the FPS. So that's the kind of game I really remind and I'm playing now.
So yeah, have you played Civilization 5 or any Civilization game?
Yeah, I've played this also. I've played Civilization in the past. I was in love with this kind of game, but that was too time consuming for me.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is long session, really long
So
game.
that's the matter. In fact, I need to find a balance. For instance, personally, I have some rules also. I'm never playing during the week, and I'm playing games between Friday evening and Sunday morning. So which doesn't mean that I'm playing all the day during the Saturday, but I'm playing a bit during the Saturday morning and also the Sunday morning, and mostly yes, there's the Friday in the evening. But what I really enjoy nowadays is playing online.
Yeah.
So because socially, that's really crazy. In fact, all the time I've played online game since a long time. I'm playing because the first game I've played online was Red Baron. So was a flying simulator during First World War. Red Baron in the 90s, I guess, and we were obliged to connect ourselves. You was connected yourself with one friend by the use of the phone. So that was that was crazy. But and playing with friends, that's amazing. In fact, you trust your play. I'm playing in Norway with people all over the world, and I have this pleasure also to play inside Head Let Loose with people I see they are coming from Germany, some from France, some other from UK, some. Yeah, that's crazy. In fact, so that's really the benefit of video game also. Playing
Yeah.
online with people, that's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah,
Um,
that wraps it up. Or
we
Marcus,
can
do you have
we
any
have some time for some, or yeah, I mean we are actually over time. I was thinking in 5 minutes, but it's actually 5 minutes ago. But yeah. Yeah, thank you again for coming today to our fourth episode of the Noroff podcast for interactive media games. And thank you all for watching. I've been Marcus, and this has been Charlie. And we hope to see you again in the future. Do you have any closing words, Doctor?
Just a few. Like, thank you, both of you, Marcus and Trusty, for this very, very interesting session. And I really like the concept, so that's really good. I'm gonna watch all the previous one you have done before, so for sure, and the next also.
I'll start
So thank you so
posting
much.
them in the summer. But yeah,
Okay,
thank you.
guys.
All right.